swear, man.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
A lawyer, have a seat. State and spell your name for the record.
My name is Jesus Maldonado, spelled J-E-S-U-S. Last name M-A-L-D-O-N-A-D-O.
Detective Maldonado, where do you work?
I'm employed currently with the City of Dunwoody Police Department.
All right, and what is your position at the Dunwoody Police Department?
Currently, I'm assigned to the DeKalb HIDA unit, undercover unit.
Okay. And what was your position? Where were you employed in November of 2010?
I was employed with Dunwoody Police, and at the time I was assigned to the Criminal Investigations Unit.
Okay, and what sort of things do detectives assigned to the Criminal Investigative Unit do?
Investigate all sorts of crimes, ranging from thefts to murders to assaults.
All right. Did you have any involvement in the investigation into the murder of Russell Sneiderman?
I did.
Okay. Can you tell the jurors a little bit, please, about what your involvement with that was?
On November 18th, 2010, I reported to work. As usual, I was working at 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Shortly after I arrived at the office, I received word through another detective, Detective Thompson, that there was a call about a person that had been shot. Initially, the call was received as a person shot near a bank. Turned on my radio, and the dispatchers updated the call to a person shot in the parking lot of a daycare located near Dunwoody Village Parkway.
And is that within the city of Dunwoody?
It is.
And is that in DeKalb County?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So what, if anything, did you do with this information?
I immediately responded to the scene, and
Let me ask you, who else was present at the scene when you arrived?
when I arrived, DeKalb County Fire and EMS personnel were present.
Was that ambulance personnel?
Yes,
Okay.
as well as uniform patrol officers.
Okay. Was the victim, Rusty Sneiderman, still present?
When I arrived, he was.
And how much longer after you arrived was Rusty Sneiderman in the ambulance and personnel that was caring for him? How long were they still on the scene?
Within minutes of me arriving, he was transported away.
Did you recall what time this was?
Believe I arrived approximately around 9:30 a.m.
All right. How long were you at the scene of the shooting that day?
I don't remember exactly. It was a while.
Several hours?
Say at least a couple, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know exactly.
In the time that you were at the scene, did you encounter the defendant at all?
I did.
Okay. And do you know the defendant?
Personally, no.
Okay. Had you ever seen her or recognized her anywhere before you saw her on November 18th?
Prior to the 18th, I had never seen her ever.
Okay. Please describe for the jurors what you were doing when you encountered the defendant.
The crime scene was already established, set up with crime scene tape.
Explain to the jury what that is or what that means.
Basically, we seal off an area where the crime occurred to preserve evidence and to process the scene. I'm called crime scene investigators come process the scene. So the area was roped off with yellow crime scene tape, just like the ones you see on TV that say crime scene, do not enter.
Why is it that a scene is roped off with crime scene tape like that?
So the only people who are allowed to be in that crime scene are the people who are working it, investigators, crime scene technicians, anyone law enforcement personnel related.
What about bystanders or civilians? Is anyone allowed inside the tape?
No, ma'am.
Okay. What about witnesses to a crime? Are they allowed inside the tape?
No, ma'am.
All right, so tell me then, how did you encounter the defendant?
As the crime scene was being worked, I looked up and saw a black sport utility vehicle entering the parking lot of the daycare. The vehicle was traveling into the daycare towards the crime scene tape. At that point in time, I made my way towards to where the tape started and observed the car stop and a female exit the vehicle.
Did the car, was it parked in a parking space?
At the time that it came to rest, it was not.
And can you estimate for me how far away from that actual scene of the shooting was the SUV that you described when it stopped?
The way the crime scene tape was set up on this particular side, it was roped off at a stop sign. Obviously, it's all on private property. And the vehicle was stopped before the tape, before the stop sign.
Your Honor, may I push the witness?
You may.
Detective Maldonado, I'm showing you what has been previously marked as State's Exhibit number 56. Do you recognize what State's Exhibit number 56 is?
I do.
What is that?
It's a photograph of the stop sign with the crime scene tape and my assigned detective vehicle on the other side of the tape.
Okay, and is that the scene, the portion of the crime scene that you were just describing for the jurors?
Yes.
And does that photo, State's Exhibit number 56, does that fairly and accurately depict the crime scene tape and the scene as you described it, as you found it on November 18, 2010?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, State moves to admit State's 56 into evidence.
Any objection? All right, there's no objection heard.
May I publish it to
You
the
may.
jury? Thank you. Hand me that back.
You may publish it to the jury.
Thank you, Your Honor. Looking at the monitor, can you describe for the jurors, please, what we're seeing in State's Exhibit number 56?
The white four-door sedan was my assigned detective vehicle at the time.
I'm going to walk over here on the large display, and I'm going to point to what I think you're talking about. Is this the four-door sedan that you're talking about right here?
Yes, it's a Ford Fusion.
Okay, that's your car?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And
Also,
what
I
else?
think you can touch that screen and it should make a mark.
Oh, that is cool. Okay.
Can I test it?
Yeah, you can touch it.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
All right, that's your car?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And where was the SUV as it pulled up in relation to your car in what we're looking at, State's Exhibit number 56?
From what I remember, it was a little bit further back around, I guess you can see where I made the marks there. But I believe it was a little further out of view of what this picture
Okay,
shows.
farther back from where your car is?
Just a little bit further back from where it was,
Okay.
from what I remember.
All right. And on this picture, can you tell us just directionally, where's the crime scene? Where is the scene of the crime?
There's two entrances to this daycare facility. There was a side entrance, and then there's a main entrance. The main entrance is to the left of this curb, on that side where I've marked it blue. The side entrance is on the right side of the curb, closer in. The victim's vehicle was parked on the right side of the curb.
Your Honor, may I push the witness?
You may.
Detective Maldonado, I'm showing you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 55. Do you recognize State's Exhibit number 55?
I do.
What is it?
It's a photograph that shows the side of the Dunwoody Prep School, basically the right side of that curb along a wall. There's a brick wall, and then there's the building.
Okay. And does State's Exhibit number 55, does that fairly and accurately depict the side of the daycare where the shooting took place as you encountered it on November 18th, 2010?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, the State moves to admit State's Exhibit number 55 into evidence.
Any objection?
No, sir.
All right, it's admitted without objection.
May I publish it to the
You
jury?
may.
Your Honor? Thank you. All right, Maldonado, I'm going to put this up on the camera, and I'm going to ask you to use the very cool screen in front of you and let the jurors know what it is that we're looking at.
Tap it on the bottom. It should erase what you have there.
Okay, yeah, it's gone. This silver vehicle here is the victim's vehicle. There's a front end of a marked patrol unit there. From where the picture was taken, if you're referring back to Exhibit 56, it was from that area, but to the right, facing left.
So where the crime scene was and where the woman who pulled up in the SUV arrived, it was even further away from the perspective in this photo?
Yeah, a little bit further back.
Okay. All right, you pointed out the victim's vehicle. Can you identify that for me again, please?
this silver vehicle parked here. It was an Infiniti, I think it was a G35.
Okay. At the time you encountered the woman who pulled up in the SUV, was that car still there?
I can't recall. I'm not sure if it was there or not
If it
at
was
that
there or
time.
not there? Okay. If you can recall, was the victim, Rusty Sneiderman, was he still present on the scene?
No, ma'am.
Okay. What about the ambulance that had been caring for him? Was the ambulance still on the scene?
No, ma'am.
Okay. What would have been visible to you and to the woman, from your perspective, as she drove up in the SUV, stopped at the crime scene tape?
From where the crime scene tape was, if the victim's vehicle was still present, that could have been seen from where it was parked.
Were there any crime scene markers up, any placards, anything like that, that would indicate evidence at the scene that you recall?
Not to my knowledge.
Can you approximate
Not
for me
sure.
what time it was that you encountered the woman who pulled up in the SUV?
Roughly, maybe between 15 and 30 minutes, and that's a rough guesstimate,
15 to 30 minutes after you arrived?
roughly,
Okay. And you told me that you arrived at what time?
around 9:30 a.m.
Okay. So somewhere between 9:45 and 10 a.m.?
More or less.
Very approximately?
Yeah,
Okay.
not exactly sure.
All right.
That part.
So tell me then about your encounter with the woman. Did you approach her, or did she approach you?
Well, when the vehicle came to rest, she got out and came towards the crime scene tape area, and we kind of met each other.
Okay. You told me that you didn't know the defendant. Do you recognize the defendant now as anyone that you had seen before?
I do now.
Okay, and who do you recognize the defendant to be?
Miss Andrea Sneiderman.
Okay, and is that the person you encountered on November 18th, 2010?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And can you describe or point out what she's wearing today?
She's a white female. She's got brown hair, and she's wearing I believe that's a pinkish shirt, blouse.
Is that more salmon?
Salmon blouse.
Record so reflect he's identified the defendant.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, what happened next? What did you do next?
The vehicle came to an abrupt stop. She exited the car. We made contact. We pretty much were she was running towards the crime scene, and I was going to make contact with her before she came into the crime scene. At the time, I did not know who she was at that moment.
Did she identify herself to you in any way?
Not that I recall.
Was she identified to you by anyone else there at the scene?
At the scene, someone, and I don't know who, mentioned that something along the lines of, that must be the wife. And that was the only thing that I heard. I assumed that they were speaking of the wife of the victim because we knew that he had just dropped off a child at the daycare facility.
You were anticipating, or someone was anticipating that someone had been notified, a family member or friend of the victim?
At that point in time, it appeared that that a close relative had been notified. I wasn't completely sure if that was the wife or not at that time.
Okay, all right. And when you say you encountered her, can you look on State's Exhibit number 56 and tell me if that picture can give you any direction or let the jurors know where it was that you encountered this woman?
It was around this area, along the line of the crime scene tape.
Okay, somewhere in the general area?
Somewhere in the general area, yes, ma'am.
Not any closer to the crime scene than that?
No, that was it.
All right, then tell me about your interaction with the defendant.
As she exited the vehicle, she was kind of running towards the crime scene. I was running towards her to make sure that they didn't come in the crime scene. And at that...
Sorry, you said they. Was the defendant
Oh,
alone?
no, I'm sorry, her.
Okay.
Yeah, she was alone. And we made contact. She asked me several times, what's going on, what's happening, what's going on. It appeared that she was in some sort of state of panic or shock. And I was just consoling her in a sense of just telling her to calm down, please calm down, please calm down.
Let me ask you anything about the defendant's physical description. Was she wearing any sort of corrective lenses that you could see?
She was wearing glasses.
Okay. And you described her demeanor. Did you approach her on your own, or was there someone else with you?
When I initially approached her, I was alone.
Okay. And what, if anything, beyond what you just told the jury, did you tell the defendant right there when you encountered her?
just to calm down, and I was trying to hold her up. There was a point in time that she kind of collapsed a little bit, and I was just didn't want her to fall on the concrete, so I was just trying to hold her up. And during that time, I was just trying to console her, to tell her to calm down.
Okay. Did there come a time where you and the defendant went to any other location beyond what we're looking at here in
Yes.
exhibit number 56?
Yes, ma'am. I knew that my sergeant at the time was inside of the daycare facility, and
Who was your sergeant at the time?
his name's Gary Cordolino. And I wanted to walk her out of that open area, away from the public eye, to a more secure location, which the closest was the inside of the daycare facility.
Okay, so is that where you took her?
Yes, that's where I walked with her to the front entrance.
Okay. Can you estimate for me how long it was that you spent with the defendant, from the time you were first encountered her when she pulled up in her SUV to the time that you escorted her inside the daycare center?
Minutes. I mean,
And during those minutes, Detective Maldonado, did you tell her that her husband had been shot?
I did not.
Did you mention anything about a victim being shot?
No, ma'am.
Did you mention anything about a shooting in the area?
No.
What information did you relay to her that at that point you communicated to her?
During our interaction, the only thing that I was telling her was to calm down, to relax, and was trying to get her to walk. I said, you got to stand up, you got to walk with me, we're going to go in the building, just calm down, relax.
Did she ask to see your husband?
I do not recall.
Detective Maldonado, were you asked to review any other piece of evidence in preparation for your trial today?
I was.
Okay, what was that piece of evidence that you were asked to review?
It was a video that was taken from a security camera at the daycare facility.
And did you review that?
I did.
Okay. May I push the witness?
You may.
Detective Maldonado, I'm showing you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 60. Do you recognize State's Exhibit number 60?
I do.
What do you recognize it to be?
It's a DVD of the security video from the daycare.
And how do you know what the contents of that are?
I viewed it and I signed off on it.
That's your signature on it?
Yes, ma'am.
And it was dated?
Yes, it was dated 8/6 of 2013.
Okay. And in your review of the video that's contained in State's Exhibit number 60?
60, yes.
60. Is that a fair and accurate representation of the interaction that you had with the defendant on November 18th, 2010?
It was.
Your Honor, State moves to admit State's Exhibit number 60.
Any objection?
No, sir. No
May be
objection.
public,
State
may be admitted without objection.
Thank
May
you, Your
publish.
Honor.
Is this audio and visual or just visual?
It's just visual, Your Honor. And I'm going to ask Detective Maldonado if you can let me know when you first see you or the defendant on the video. And I'll ask Mr. Pascal to pause it at that time. Is
Right
that
where I
your time?
pointed.
Stop it.
The other side, where the walls come together there, it appears that I am with Ms. Sneiderman at that time. The gentleman, I believe, that's walking in front was a lieutenant uniform patrol.
All right, you made a small blue mark, and I appreciate that. I wonder if you could make it a little larger so that the jury can see the video. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And you and the defendant are where?
Right where that blue mark is.
Okay. So where's the crime scene tape that we were looking at in State's Exhibit number 56?
From what I can see on the video, it's hard to tell from where it says converter. It looks like the curb goes up this way.
Mm-hmm.
And the crime scene tape was up around there because that's where the entrance comes in from here, from Mount Vernon Road.
I see.
And then there's the crime scene tape is in between
Okay.
there.
All right. Can you finish playing it? Can you stop it?
I'm on the That's me here on the left. The black silhouette here is Miss Sneiderman. I believe she was wearing, I guess you can call it a business suit. It was a long skirt with a black top. And I'm escorting her towards the entrance of the daycare, which is right here. The gentleman that was walking ahead of me, his name is Lieutenant William Hegwood. He's also with Dunwoody Police. He was the lieutenant on duty at the time.
Can you continue, please?
During this time, I'm telling Miss Sneiderman to calm down. We were walking, she stopped, and then during that time I was just telling her we got to keep walking, just trying to calm down.
I don't see any other law enforcement or detectives or anyone else around you. Did you have, or when you encountered the defendant, was there anybody else who was around her?
When I initially encountered her, no. I mean, Lieutenant Hegwood was in the area, but he was walking ahead of us.
Were you with the defendant for the entire time that she was outside in the parking lot?
I was.
All right, and did anyone else have a conversation with her while you were present?
No.
Did anybody else have a conversation with her besides you at the time she was outside the scene?
At the time that I was in contact with her, no one else had contact with her. There was another set of contact that was made after I left her at the entrance to the daycare facility, and that's when she was taken inside by, I believe it was 2 employees of the
Did you go
daycare.
inside?
No, if you saw the video, the last clip of it, once I handed her over, I turned around and walked back towards the crime scene with the lieutenant.
We're back on the record, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. At the time of the video, what we just saw, had any other family member, Detective Maldonado, showed up or appeared at the crime scene that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Let me ask you, why is it that you are so sure that you didn't mention or tell the defendant that there had been a shooting or her husband had been shot?
Considering her reaction when she arrived at the scene and the way that we police officers are supposed to do death notifications or notify any person of any traumatic event involving one of their loved ones, the time and place that our encounter didn't make any sense. And you saw in the video the way that she was reacting. There was no way that I was going to tell someone that they just lost a loved one in a parking lot of where she was.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
From the vantage point where the defendant pulled up in her SUV, was there any way that it was obvious or clear what specifically had happened there at the scene?
Not really. There's no. When you pull up at the scene, all you see is cars parked in the parking lot. Obviously there was some police activity, and you see the crime scene tape. But as far as having any sort of direct indication as to what occurred there, it would be hard to tell.
Thank you, Detective.
Yes, ma'am.
I have no further questions.
You may cross-examine if you wish.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
Detective Maldonado, my name is John Peach, and I've got a few questions for you, sir.
Yes, sir.
You indicated that the defendant, when she drove up in a black SUV. Did I understand you to say that she pulled up and parked very close to where your detective unit was?
In the general area, from what I recall.
In the general, how many car lengths from your car? Rough, if you can recall.
I don't know.
More than 10? Fewer than 5? Can you give us your best recollection? Not a guess, but your best recollection.
My best recollection, maybe less than 10.
Now, you testified just a few minutes ago that, bear with me just 1 second.
Take your time.
when she drove up, you stated that you, quote, kind of met each other.
Well, the way, yeah, kind of met, meaning that she wasn't standing there while I was walking towards her. She got out of the car and it was kind of like I was going towards her and she was coming towards the scene at the same time.
But you didn't just kind of meet. She fell into your arms, didn't she?
Well, when she got out of the car, we met, and then we had our interaction. That's correct.
Answer my question, please. Did she
Okay.
or did she not fall into your arms?
She did.
Okay. Now, when she got out of that car, you were not by yourself, were you?
When she got out of the car,
Yes, and you met her and first encountered her. Wasn't Officer or Detective Fladrick, if I'm pronouncing that right, with you?
I don't remember him being with me
Okay.
at there.
What number is this, please, ma'am? 17? Let me show you a document, sir.
Okay.
And I'm going to show you this document.
Yes, sir, you may approach.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to show you this document. I'm going to ask you, first of all, to just look at it in general, see if you can identify what it is. Don't tell us yet any content.
Okay.
And then I'm going to ask you to direct your attention to the last two paragraphs on the second page, and I've got some questions for you. Now, just let me know, if you will, please, sir, when you've had a chance to review it. At this time, other than the nature of the document, the only things I need you actually to review would be those last two paragraphs.
Okay.
When you finish reading, look up.
Okay.
Has that refreshed your memory, sir?
I do not remember Lieutenant Fladrick being next to me during the encounter with Miss Sneiderman.
If in fact Lieutenant Fladrick reported that he was, would you have any reason?
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
I object to the relevance of someone else's recollection or referring this witness to somebody else's report.
Well, first of all, is the objection that you objecting to him looking at the report now?
No.
Because
no
he's since
objection.
looked at it.
He did, and if it had refreshed his recollection, then I would have no objection.
So what's the objection?
That the witness' recollection was not refreshed, and I object to,
I'm sorry, I
object to the form of the question.
Well, we don't know what the form of the question was, Your Honor, because I didn't get to finish it.
I agree with that. Finish the question. And then you may want to remain standing, because once he finishes, if you don't make an objection, there's going to be an answer. So that's the way it works. There's no objection right now, so finish your question.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Detective Maldonado, if in fact there were a report from Lieutenant Fladrick, is that his name?
Fladrick, yes.
Fladrick, indicating that he was there with you when you first encountered Mrs. Sneiderman and witnessed her fall into your arms, my question is simply, would you have any reason to dispute that he in fact was there?
If he notated it, then he was. I mean, but I don't remember him being next to me during that time. That's what I was testifying to earlier.
Okay, I'm not asking you to guess, but you have no reason to dispute that if in fact that was the report.
No, sir.
And you stated that when she arrived, she was in what you described as a state of panic or shock. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And have you been a uniform officer as well?
Yes, sir.
How long were you a uniform officer?
Roughly 5 years.
Okay, what agency or agencies?
I worked for the City of Marietta Police Department from 04 to 09 before I came to Dunwoody.
Am I correct in my belief that probably as a uniform officer as opposed to a detective, you encountered more people in panic or shock or reacting immediately after a traumatic experience? Would that be correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you have, in fact, in your capacity as a uniform officer, witnessed people in shock in panic, reacting to traumatic experiences,
That's correct.
multiple times.
Yes, sir.
She kept asking, what's happened, words to that effect.
Yes, sir.
You did not tell her what had happened, correct?
I did not.
To the best of your knowledge, no other officer or person from the school or bystander, EMS technician, fireman, detective, nobody else, to your knowledge, told her what happened there,
I can't speak for anybody
that
else,
you heard.
but from what my encounter with Ms. Sneiderman, I did not tell her what happened.
But my question is, did you hear anybody else tell her?
Not at that time.
And that's the time we're talking about.
Yet, did not hear anybody tell her.
You walked her up to essentially the door of Dunwoody Prep, and some women who worked there or who came from inside took her the rest of the way. Is that correct?
Yes, there was 2 workers and my detective sergeant, Sergeant Cordolino.
Okay, Gary Cordolino was inside, came outside, and the 2 women who may or may not have worked there came out, hugged her, and took her inside, correct?
That's correct.
And during the time that you were with her, did she ever inquire about anything other than essentially what has happened, what has happened?
From what I recall, she just asked me that question over and over again. What's going on? What happened? What happened?
Now, in the video, there's a scene where the 2 of you stop, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it's a little difficult to tell how long that is from the video because I'm not sure that it's really in real time. Would you agree with that? That it seemed to be a little herky-jerky, the video itself.
Oh, herky-jerky meaning the quality of the video?
No. It doesn't have, it's not like it's not Blu-ray quality.
Exactly, yes.
You're not seeing every movement that you and she made there.
But I can agree with that. Okay.
Now, when it appears that when you stop, that she is literally, her knees are going out, and that you are holding her up. Can you tell us what was being said by you or by her at that time? If you can, was anything being said?
At that time, when her knees began to give out, I was holding her up. I kept telling her, you got to get up, you got to get up. Just relax, just calm down, you got to get up. We were almost to the front door. I was trying to get her there in one piece.
And that was difficult, was it not?
It was hard.
One moment, please.
You may. We're back on the record.
Yep.
Well, you need.
Pardon, Your Honor.
We're back on the record. You
And,
may.
yes, sir, and I have no more questions for Mr. Maldonado. Thank you so much,
All
sir.
right. Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, lawyers, may this witness be released and excused from his subpoena.
Yes, from the state, Your Honor.
No
Any objection?
John, I apologize if I continue to interrupt you when you're asking whether or not it's objection, and I always jump it up to
That's
that.
fine.
There is no objection. I do apologize for jumping to that answer.
No problem. You may come down, sir. You're free to go. Drive safely. Call your next witness. You're welcome. Have a good day.
Your Honor, the state calls Detective Andy Thompson, please.
And is he in undercover capacity also that I need to know about
No, Your Honor.
beforehand?
You know what? Not that I'm aware of.
Where you're not aware of it, you're not asking?
No, I'm
He
not
can be
asking.
videotaped.
No.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I know you may proceed. State and spell your name for the record.
Detective Andrew Thompson, A-N-D-R-E-W. Last name is T-H-O-M-P-S-O-N.
He's been sworn. He's with you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Thompson, where are you employed?
The Dunwoody Police Department.
In what capacity?
as a detective
How long have you been with the Dunwoody Police Department?
since its inception in 2009.
Since '09? Did you work in law enforcement prior to joining Dunwoody?
I did. I spent approximately 8 years with the Atlanta Police Department.
8 with the Atlanta Police Department?
Yes, ma'am.
What capacity did you work in at the Atlanta Police Department?
The last 1 to 2 years, I was a detective, and when I left Atlanta, I was with the narcotics unit.
Okay. Were you employed with Dunwoody Police Department back in November of 2010?
I was.
And sir, were you assigned to work a homicide involving a victim by the name of Russell Sniper?
I was.
Were you the sole officer working that case, or were there other officers assigned as well?
The entire CID unit, Criminal Investigations Division, was assigned to work the case as well as assistance from patrol.
Okay. So there were, when you say the entire CID unit, how many people are we talking?
5 detectives, 1 sergeant.
5 detectives and 1 sergeant.
Yes, ma'am.
And as it related to the other 5 detectives and the 1 sergeant, what was your role in the investigation?
Sergeant Corlino made me the lead investigator for the homicide.
All right. So when you say you were made the lead investigator, what does that mean? Explain to the jury what you would have to do as the lead investigator.
In theory, what the lead investigator is, he's the focal point for all the information in a criminal investigation. Anybody who's assisting in the investigation will go out, get information, funnel it back to the lead investigator. The lead investigator then decides what the priority of the investigation is for the information that he's receiving. He delegates out the people that are assisting him to follow up on further investigative details while the lead investigator handles what he feels are the most promising leads for the investigation.
Okay, and is it fair to say, I guess, that the lead investigator is sort of the coordinator?
Correct.
Now, had you been a lead investigator with Dunwoody at this point on any other homicides?
No, ma'am.
All right,
This was
so
my first.
This was the first. Now, I want to talk to you about the homicide investigation involving Russell Sneiderman.
Okay.
Where did the homicide take place, sir?
At the Dunwoody School in the Dunwoody Village area.
Dunwoody School?
Dunwoody Prep. It's for younger kids.
Okay, daycare center?
Daycare center. Thank you.
Did you respond to Dunwoody Prep on the morning of November 18th?
A call went out on the radio that shots were fired. It initially came out as a bank in the Dunwoody Village area, and there was a description of a suspect vehicle in the last known direction of it. So I went to a intersecting point to sit and wait to see if the suspect vehicle would come by me.
Let me stop you for a moment. The
Yes, ma'am.
suspect vehicle, what do you mean by that?
There was a description of a silver minivan
Okay,
that was possibly involved
all right.
with it. So I went to a point that I thought would be in front of where that van might be going to at the time that the radio made the broadcast on it. I arrived, sat there for, it wasn't a very long time until when Sandy Springs PD showed up. They were assisting us in trying to find the suspect vehicle. When they arrived at the location, I then went to the Dunwoody Daycare Center to assist with the investigation.
So let me ask you, you went to a location to see if you would see the silver minivan.
Correct.
Did you encounter a silver minivan
No.
all that morning? Give us an approximation, or if you know, the time that you arrived to the location.
I don't know the time I arrived, but when I did arrive, Rusty had already been transported from the scene. And the crime scene tape was up, and there was several people there doing initial interviews with witnesses on the scene.
So let me just ask you this. In your experience as a detective,
Yes, ma'am?
when a detective is assigned to a case, is it normal for, say, the uniform officers to respond first
Yes.
to the scene?
Yes, typically the uniform officers will be the first to get to the scene because they're already out in the field answering 911 calls.
And do they take any action before the detective generally would get there?
They will set up the crime scene tape to preserve where the crime scene area is.
Okay, and was that done by the time that you had arrived?
Yes, it was.
You told us when you arrived at the scene, Mr. Sneiderman was not there, is that correct?
That's correct.
Were there any ambulances on scene at all?
No.
So what did you do once you arrived to the scene?
Once I arrived at the scene, Sergeant Coralino told me he was going to assign the homicide to me. And so at that point, I looked over the crime scene to see what there was. The crime scene technicians were not on scene yet, so I made sure that they were en route.
Let me stop you.
Yes.
The crime scene technicians were not on scene yet.
Correct.
Tell us who the crime scene technicians are as it relates to an investigation.
What a crime scene technician does is they basically process a crime scene. In general, the lead investigator will show up after patrol shows up. The initial responding officer will tell the detective what they have found on the crime scene, including any witnesses they spoke to. Then I would decide if a crime scene technician needs to come out. If it does, once the crime scene technician comes out, I walk them through the crime scene, pointing out evidence that I found, and then I leave the scene and everything is left to the crime scene technician to research the scene, look for evidence, mark it with numbers, with however they need to mark it, take pictures, measurements, and once they do their investigation of the crime scene, they report back to the lead detective as to what they found, where things were found, and the detective then takes that information and incorporates it into the investigation, whatever the crime is and however he sees appropriate.
Okay, so when you say they mark it and measure the
Yes.
scene, that's done after you, the detective, leave the scene?
It could be while I'm there or after I leave.
Now, when you arrived at Dunwoody, you just told us that the crime scene technicians were not there.
Correct.
So were there or were there not any markings or measurements or any indications of any evidence of a crime that had occurred when you got there?
I don't remember seeing any markings pointing out anything specific on the crime scene.
Do you know or recognize the defendant in this case?
Yes, I do.
And how do you know or recognize the defendant?
She is the wife of the victim, the person who was shot, Rusty Sneiderman, and I had the occasion to interview her several times.
Okay. And if you would just identify an item of clothing that she's wearing today for the record, please.
Yes, she's wearing she's at the defense table wearing a pink shirt, long blonde hair.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that Detective Thompson has identified the pink shirt.
I will, yes, the record may so reflect, yes.
Thank you, Judge. All right. When you arrived at the scene, was the defendant at the scene?
No, she was not.
Okay. Did you speak with her at all
No, I did not.
at the scene?
Not at the scene.
Did you ever have an opportunity to observe her at the scene?
I did. First time I saw her is when she got out of her vehicle and started screaming. I can't remember exactly what she was screaming, but she was being very loud, very dramatic about what was going on. I made an assumption that she's probably related in some way to the person who was shot.
Okay. Now, let me stop you. How close or how far? What was the distance between you and the defendant at that time? And you can just relatively tell us, was she close? Was she far?
Well, less than 40 yards.
Okay, when you say
It's,
40 yards.
well, let's see. She was probably no further than from me to the double doors in the back of the room.
Okay, Your Honor, if the record could reflect that the officer has pointed to the doors that are, how far would you?
I would have to get a
Yes.
measuring tape. That's
For the record,
40
reflect, he
feet, maybe?
pointed to double doors in the courtroom.
That's fine with me, just, thank you. When, so she was about that distance from you.
approximately.
Was she allowed inside of the crime scene?
No.
Did she ever come close to the crime scene?
She was parked right up to the crime scene tape. And
And-
that was,
I'm sorry.
at that location, it was a little bit further than the second set of double doors behind that.
And are you referring to the doors that are beyond the set of double doors that you
That's
you
correct.
just identified?
That's correct.
So there's an interior set,
Is
and
it-
there's an exterior set.
Right, she was a little bit further than the exterior set of doors.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. While you were at the scene, Detective Thompson, did you have an occasion to speak to any of the victim's family members?
Yes, her mother and father arrived on the scene. They came up to the crime scene tape and were about to come under it. I went over to them and said, you can't come in here. And they told me who they were.
Now, let me
that
stop you.
point.
You said her mother and father. Whose mother and father?
Andrea Sneiderman's mother and
Okay.
father.
Did they come at the same time that she arrived?
After.
After. And you said they were about to come under the crime scene tape.
Correct.
Were you able to stop them?
Yes.
When they were about to come under the crime scene tape, was Rusty's body there?
No,
Were there crime scene technicians out at that time?
I don't believe so.
And to your knowledge, was any information given to the family about the victim's condition?
No, I told them that Rusty had been hurt, but that was the extent of the information I told them.
Okay. And when you say,
Excuse me, when you say they, because she's talking about two different transactions.
Okay.
Who's they?
The mother and father, Andrea Sneiderman's mother and father.
Go ahead.
thank you, Judge. And as the judge said, you were talking about the mother and father. Did you ever give the defendant any information about Rusty's condition?
I did not give Andrea any information.
Were there any witnesses at the scene when you arrived?
Yes, there were 3 eyewitnesses and the initial doctor from the pediatrician clinic a few doors down that had tried to resuscitate Rusty.
Okay. Did you have an opportunity to speak to the witnesses that were at the scene?
I spoke to the 3 witnesses briefly at the scene to find out what they knew and if it was worthwhile to have them come in later for a more in-depth interview as to what they saw. They did have significant information, so I collected their contact information. So I'll be asking if they would be available later that day to come in and speak, and they gave me the information and I made the arrangements.
Okay. So when you say they had significant information, how do you determine what's significant and what's insignificant in an investigation at that stage?
Anybody who specifically witnesses the crime has significant information.
And were one or all 3 of these witnesses individuals who had witnessed the crime?
All 3 had witnessed the crime in some fashion.
And were you able to get a description from the witnesses of the individual responsible?
Yes, I did.
Were you also able to learn what happened to the victim
From the witness's description and from what was on the crime scene tape, I had a good idea as to what happened that day.
Okay. When you spoke to the witnesses, did any of them get a good look at the face of, well, let me back up and just ask you, when you spoke to the witnesses, did they tell you what they saw?
Yes, and all 3 had some description of what the shooter looked like.
So you just said shooter. Did you learn that there was a shooter at the scene?
I did.
And you were able to get a description?
I was able to get a description.
Did they get a good look at the shooter?
Yes, ma'am.
And was the face obstructed in any way as far as the investigation revealed?
Everybody had a clear view of the shooter, Hemi Newman. At the scene, 2 of the witnesses saw him walking up to Rusty, shooting him, and then walk back to the minivan and take off.
Do you know, you just identified the shooter as Hemi Newman. Do you know whether or not Hemi Newman had any facial hair or anything at the time?
He was wearing a beard.
Was it a natural beard?
It was a fake beard.
Okay. You also told us earlier that you had a description of a silver minivan. Did you get information about the van as well from the witnesses?
And all the witnesses described a silver minivan with it, and in addition to that, we were able to recover video from the daycare center that corresponded with what the witnesses described and identified the minivan.
So you actually were able to obtain video from the daycare center with footage of the van on it.
That's correct.
And what, if anything, did you do with the footage of the van?
I kept playing the video over and over again, saying that there's got to be something on this van to distinguish it from any other van. And I was eventually able to, once I put it on a big screen, I found a sticker on the windshield that was very commonly used for rental car companies to establish that it was a rental car. So at that point, I took various still photos from the video that showed the grille of the vehicle, the hubcaps of the vehicle, various design specifics of that vehicle, and brought it to several dealerships to see if they could advise me if this was their car or not, what was it, could they tell me the year, all that kind of thing.
And were you able to narrow it down to the type of vehicle?
Year, make, and model.
And were you actually able to locate the van that you saw in the footage from the daycare?
Yes, we actually were able to find it. We had assistance from the DA's office, their investigators, our supervisors, our detectives, and the rental car company. I can't remember which rental car company it was. The rental car company would advise us whenever, actually even before that, we went to Kia headquarters. They're called Kia headquarters out in California, and they provided us a list of all year, make, and model specific to this vehicle that had been sold that year. And it only came up with a list of, I think, approximately 1,600 vehicles, and only a very much smaller portion of that was actually sold in Georgia. And out of the ones in Georgia, there were fewer that were privately purchased and some that were corporate purchased for rental car companies. And we went out to every person in Georgia, including South Carolina, that had purchased this vehicle, and to interview them to see if they were in the area, they could have been there. We dismissed everybody that privately purchased the vehicle, and then we focused primarily on the rental vehicles. That's how we came up with the, I think it was Enterprise. Had these vehicles in their fleet, and they would notify us whenever this particular year, make, model van was returned to their business. And once they notified us, the rental company held the vehicle at that particular office. We went out there to look at it. Everybody who went out had pictures of the van, and they tried to match it up. If it didn't match, we crossed it off, and we eventually found the van with the stickers in the appropriate locations on the windshield up, I believe it was in Canton.
In Canton, Georgia?
In Canton, Georgia.
And Canton being just, I guess, north of
It's north of
Cobb
us.
County, Marietta area. Once you were able to kind of narrow down that van, what did you do next?
We impounded the van for further investigation. We had it processed, I believe I can't remember if we processed it or the GBI processed the van. We were able to get some hair fibers out of it. We got some other material out of it that didn't specify anybody with it, but we also got a list of people who had rented that van during the time period of the homicide, and because of the fake beard, we're assuming the fake beard at the time that was being worn, I said, well, let me also get a list of people who rented the van during Halloween. And I contacted the family who rented it during Halloween, and they said they didn't wear anything that had any fake hair, wigs, or anything like that inside the van. And on the list of people who rented the van during the homicide was Hemi Newman covering that specific date.
So when you got the list of the individuals who had rented the vehicle, would you characterize those names on that list now as, say, potential leads in your investigation?
Correct.
What about the physical description that you were able to obtain from the witnesses? Did you do anything with the physical description?
We had a GBI forensic artist come out the next day and speak with the witnesses to draw up a forensic sketch of the suspect.
Once the forensic sketch is drawn up based on the description, what, if anything, do you do with that sketch?
There were 3 sketches made up.
And you say 3 sketches, is that in relation to your 3 witnesses?
For the 3 witnesses. Each
Okay.
witness did their own sketch with the forensic artist. And based on all the information I had, I picked the sketch that most closely matched everybody's description at the time that they were interviewed.
Okay.
I
What did you do with that?
I presented the image to Andrea first to see if it reminded her of anybody. Do you know this person?
What'd she say?
And she said no, but she kept asking me can we take the beard off the picture? Can you remove the beard? She asked me that several times, and I explained to her, we can't do that because that's not what the witnesses saw. They saw the suspect with the beard, and we don't know what the facial structure is underneath the beard, so we can't guess at that.
Okay. So at that time, did she maybe try and cover the beard or anything and take a look at the sketch? as far
I
as you
don't
recall?
recall if she tried to do that or not.
Do you recall if she made mention, you told us about the beard, do you recall if she made mention about any other physical characteristic that was shown in that sketch?
No, the sketch did not remind her of anybody.
Did she mention the eyes in the sketch?
I don't remember.
Did she mention the nose in the sketch?
No, she was just focusing on the beard.
Okay. So now, after you went out to the scene that morning and you spoke to the 3 witnesses, was that done before or after you got the list from the car rental company, speaking to the witnesses?
The list from the car rental company happened in December.
Okay. So at the time that you spoke to the witnesses, did you have any leads on who had killed Rusty Sneiderman?
No specific names. All we had was a description of a vehicle. At the time we spoke to the witnesses, a description of the vehicle and the sketch.
Did you have any leads on why someone would shoot and kill Rusty Sneiderman?
No.
At the time that you were at the scene and you interviewed those 3 witnesses, did you have any idea who you were looking for?
No.
Do you know whether or not Mr. Sneiderman had any personal effects on him that were recovered at the scene?
He had an envelope in his jacket pocket that looked like he may have trying to go to the post office afterwards to mail it. Wedding band, watch.
What about a wallet?
There was no wallet on the scene.
Did you look for a wallet at the scene?
We did, and we asked the people from the clinic that was a few doors down that came out to help Rusty if they remember seeing a wallet, and nobody ever remembered seeing a wallet on the scene.
During the course of your investigation, did you ever locate a wallet?
No.
Did you do anything else on the 18th after you left, or at the scene, after you spoke to the witnesses and called in the technicians?
Yes, after I felt I couldn't get any more information from the scene itself, I contacted Detective Gobley, who was at the hospital where Rusty was transported, to see what information she has been able to gather there. She told me.
Don't tell us what anybody else said.
She told me what she gathered,
Okay.
and then I went down to the hospital.
So you sent some other officers down to the hospital.
That's correct.
Okay. What else did you do after you spoke to the witnesses at the scene?
Well, I went down to the hospital.
Okay.
I looked inside the,
Which hospital did you go to?
I believe it was the Atlanta Medical Center.
Go ahead.
The personal effects that the hospital staff put Rusty's stuff into the bag. I looked in that bag for the wallet, no wallet in the bag. I went to the little family room where the Sneidermans were sitting waiting for information from the hospital staff. And I spoke with Andrea and the family very briefly in the waiting room.
Okay. Now, do you know about what time this is?
I have no idea what time it was.
Okay. Was it soon after you left the scene? Was it several hours
It was
after you left the scene?
probably within an hour or two after I left the scene. Or, I went directly from the scene to the hospital, so it was within 30 minutes.
All right. So within 30 minutes of leaving the scene, how long were you out at the scene?
Say maybe an hour-ish.
And I believe you testified to this, but I want to make sure. Do you know what time you arrived at the scene?
I don't remember what time I arrived.
All right. So you went to the hospital.
Yes.
Did you do anything else that day?
I spoke to the family at the hospital, and
Did you, when you spoke to the family at the hospital, at that time, what did you tell them?
I didn't tell them anything because the hospital staff had already informed them of what was going on, I
Now,
believe.
When you say, you gotta have to identify
I'm
who
sorry,
you're talking. When you say them and the family, you gotta have to call names of who you're talking to.
Yes, sir.
At the hospital.
At the hospital, I spoke to Andrea, her father and mother, and Todd, her brother,
Okay.
was at the hospital.
And I need for you, when I ask you what did you say, I need for you to tell me what you said, okay? So that we're not talking about what others said.
Yes, ma'am.
What did you say to the family when you arrived at the hospital?
Well, I was trying to get a baseline investigation going so I know what I need to be looking for. And we spoke very briefly about how Rusty was supposed to be having
Go ahead.
a lunch that day, so I got information about Neil Jagoda.
Let me just ask you this. In general, were you attempting to get information so that you would know where to start your investigation?
Yes.
All right. And when you attempted to get information through speaking with the family, did you develop what you would call some leads?
I didn't know if there were leads at the time, but I developed information for me to start following up with once I was able to get back to the office.
Okay. Did any of that information involve or include the name Hemi Newman?
No.
So once you spoke to the family at the hospital, did you do anything else that day?
2 search warrants were drawn up. 1 search warrant for Rusty Sneiderman's vehicle and 1 search warrant for the house, for where Andrea and Rusty lived.
All right. You drew up a search warrant for Rusty's vehicle. Why?
We needed to search the vehicle to see if there was any evidence inside the vehicle that'd be pertinent to this crime.
And did you, in fact, search the vehicle?
The GBI searched the vehicle. We had the car impounded to the GBI crime lab, got the search warrant, delivered it to them, and they did their search of the vehicle.
Okay. And then the second search warrant you obtained was for the home?
Correct.
Whose home?
Rusty and Andrea's house.
All right. And that was on the 18th of November.
That's correct.
Did you, in fact, go to execute the search warrant at the home?
Yes, Sergeant Corlino and I went to the home that evening to serve the search warrant.
Now, let me just back up a second and ask you, when you obtain a search warrant, explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury the difference between a search warrant and a consent to search.
A consent to search is one of the more easier searches to obtain. You speak to the person, in this case, I'd speak to Andrea and say, may I search your house? And she says, yes. I have a form that says you have been advised of your rights, that you can stop this search at any time, and they have to be present to you during the consent to search. And if at any point they say, I want you to stop searching this, we stop searching. For an actual search warrant, you have to testify in front of a judge the facts of the case and why the location you want to search is pertinent to your investigation. Why do you think there might be evidence there? How is it connected to your investigation? And if the judge believes that there's enough probable cause to connect the search location to your crime, then he grants a search warrant. And the search warrant supersedes anything that the family or whoever owns the property can do. They cannot tell you to stop. They cannot bar you from going in. If they try to lock the door, you can kick the door in to do the search. You can do whatever you need to do to execute that search warrant.
Okay. So a search warrant sort of takes the control away from the individual who's being searched.
That's correct.
You don't have a choice in that.
That person does not have the choice.
And you did, in fact, obtain a search warrant from a judge as it relates to your investigation?
That's correct.
I'm assuming this was an official investigation.
Correct.
And did you, in fact, go out to the defendant's home to execute the search warrant?
I did.
Were you successful?
I was not.
Tell us what happened.
When we arrived at the house, Andrea, her father and mother, came out of the front door, and I told them that we were there to serve the search warrant, and Andrea's father refused to let us in. I was trying to explain to him that you really don't have a choice. We have to come in and serve the search warrant. He continued to refuse to let us inside the house, and I was about to tell him, you either get out of the way or you're going to go to jail for obstruction. But at that point, Sergeant Cordolino, my supervisor, said,
Don't tell us what he said, but did he interject himself?
Sergeant Cordolino interjected, and we ended up not serving that search warrant that night.
Okay. Now, when you had this encounter with the defendant's father, you said that both she and her mother were present as well?
Right, everybody was out in front.
All right.
Andrea, the father and the mother, were out in front of the house.
So you and Sergeant Cordolino left the
Correct.
residence at that time?
Yes.
Did you do anything else that day?
No.
All right, let's move to the next day, which would be November 19th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you go out to the defendant's home, or did you make arrangements to go out to the defendant's home?
We made arrangements to go out to the home to do an initial interview and to serve the search warrant.
With whom did you make the arrangements?
I don't remember specifically, but they were aware that we're going to be coming over that day.
So, I'm sorry, what did you just say?
So I don't remember specifically who we made the arrangements with, but the family was aware that we were coming that day.
Okay, so you made an appointment.
That's correct.
Do you remember what time you were going out to the home?
I don't remember what time we actually got out there, but it was still daylight.
Okay.
Do you normally make appointments to serve a search warrant?
No, sir, I do not.
Go ahead.
And in fact, was it your decision to make the appointment, or was it your intent to execute the warrant?
It was my intent to execute the warrant the evening of the 18th. As my normal practice, whenever you're serving a search warrant on any location, regardless if it's the victims or suspects, I do not tell them that I am coming out to serve a search warrant to preserve the integrity of the case, basically.
And why is that? When you say preserve the integrity of the case, what does that mean?
If you give a person notification of coming out to serve a search warrant and they know that there's evidence inside or at the location you're going to search, it gives them the opportunity to destroy or hide or move the evidence that is pertinent to the case.
And in this instance, you were not able to execute that warrant on the night of the murder, correct?
That's correct.
And it was only by appointment that you were actually able to come out and execute the warrant on the next day.
That's correct.
About how many hours had passed, would you say, from the time that you went to the home on the 18th and the time that you were actually allowed into the home?
It wasn't 24 hours, but it was definitely more than 12 hours.
More than 12,
More
less
than
than 24.
That's correct.
So when you went out to the home, did you go alone?
Sergeant Corlino came with me.
So you and Sergeant Cordolino arrived at the home.
Correct.
Did you just walk in or did you knock on the door?
Rang the doorbell, knocked on the door, being very polite. They opened the door. The family opened the door and let us into the house.
So they invited you in.
Correct.
And when they invited you in, did you at that point just go in and start your search pursuant to your search warrant?
No, we sat down at their dining room table, one of those large tables we can sit a bunch of people around, and had our initial interview with Andrea and the family. There was also, they had a bunch of family and friends in the house, kids in the house that were coming over for support of the family because of the incident that happened.
So there were a lot of people in the home.
A lot of people.
And you all came in and were invited to sit down at the table.
Correct.
Kitchen table, living room table, dining room?
It's a dining room table, very similar if you have a large family, it's large enough to sit a large family down and have a good dinner.
And was there in fact, say, a large family seated at the table when you came in?
Yes,
Did they excuse themselves when you walked in or did they remain?
no, we all sat down at the table and started discussing the incident.
So your interview took place in which room? The dining room, did you say?
I'm calling it the dining room,
In the dining room. By invitation,
by invitation.
with about how many people seated at the table?
By the end of the interview, 7, 8 people.
7 or 8 people. And I take note because you said by the end of the interview, were people just allowed access to and from the room during this?
It was, anybody could walk through the room that we were talking at any time.
And I stopped short of saying how I was characterizing it. Was it a discussion or was it an interview?
It was probably a combination of both. It was more of a discussion based on the location, how many people were around, but I was interviewing the family to get some kind of information to guide me in the investigation.
Okay. When you say you
At
were,
some point, you're gonna have to identify who's sitting at this table.
Yes, sir. There was, would you like me to do that now,
well,
Your Honor?
Or you're gonna get to
I
that?
was going to just, but
Well, go ahead.
we can move to that point. And
All right.
if you would just tell us who was seated at the table with you and Sergeant Cordolino.
There was Todd, Andrea's sister,
Who's Todd?
Andrea's brother, Todd.
Okay.
Andrea,
When you say Andrea, who you
Andrea
talking about?
Sneiderman,
Defendant
the
and
defendant.
six? Okay.
Andrea's mother, Andrea's father.
Do you know her mother's name?
I don't recall it.
All right. Do you recall her father's name?
I believe it's Herb
Herb. Do you know the last name?
Sneiderman. It's not Sneiderman. I don't remember the last name.
Okay. So you got a
The-
brother, her mother, her father, and her.
Right. Rusty's mother and father,
Do you
the
recall?
victims.
Do you
mother-
recall their names?
I do not.
All right. Mr. and Mrs. Snyderman.
Mr. and Mr. Sneiderman.
Who else?
And eventually Rusty's brother walked in.
Do you remember his name?